Good afternoon, Ma'am Principal Dr. Ekta Khosla, today's chief guest Dr. Manoranjan Sharma, dear colleagues and students present in this virtual platform. The topic of today's talk is Insights on Union Budget 2023. It's a great honor for us that today Dr. Manoranjan Sharma, who remains Chief Economist of Canara Bank for 17 years, General Manager for 6 years, and Chief Learning Officer for 5 years, will deliberate on the Union Budget 2023. He has a brilliant academic record and globally recognized as an expert in Indian economy, banking, MSMEs, rural credit, and financial inclusions, etc. He is the only invited speaker from India at an international conference held in Morocco in October 2022. He has made presentations and chaired many sessions at national and international level. He has been nominated member over a dozen advisory councils in 7 states. He is associated with many banks, leading institutions which are in Singapore, Malaysia, Paris, RBI, IIM, IITs, etc. He has over 300 publications of national and international journal of repute and got various distinctions, awards and honors. Now I would like to invite Madam Principal for formal welcome of Dr. Sharma.
Thank you, Dr. Hardeep. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. I welcome Dr. Manoranjan Sharma, Chief Economist of Informeric's Rating, New Delhi. Though it is virtual platform, sir, welcome you in virtual premises of R.R. Bawa DAV College for Girls, Batala.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your kind words.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation in spite of your busy schedule. I know that you are very busy nowadays because union budget has just been released and many analysis type of things are going on with you. But your expert opinion will definitely be beneficial for all the faculty members and students, particularly of economics and commerce, this department. Whatever, sir, we have grasped from news channels or newspaper headlines definitely needs insight. And your expertise in the field of economics is exemplary. I know that I have heard, more than once in web platforms earlier also, and we have already conducted your podcast in RR Baba, and we know that you have that insight, and we are fortunate to have you amongst us in this session. And I am really humbled and thankful to you for accepting our invitation for benefit of our students, particularly on Sunday. It's a weekend, it's a Sunday, it is a relaxing type of day for all of us. But thank you so much for sparing your valuable time. And I'm very sure that today our faculty and students will be able to see beyond tax slabs, inflation, the myths and realities of banking sector, and above all, the effect of new union budget in higher education. Sir, we being in Batala is particularly industrial city, the oldest industrial city of Punjab. We will also like to understand the impacts of new budget on industry. And in previous years we have seen that higher education sector is shifting towards skill development, so there must be some impact of this union budget 23 on skill development. So I would appreciate if you share your valuable insights in these particular areas also. So thank you so much once again, and I must congratulate the organizers of this webinar on Sunday, Dr. Meenakshi Duggal, HOD Economics Department, Dr. Hardeep Kaur from Commerce Department, and Mr. Mandeep from Department of Computer Science for conducting this session in virtual mode. So once again, Thank you so much. And I'm very sure that today's session is going to be the most interesting session of this semester. Thank you. Over to Dr. Hardeep.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So now, without much delay, handing this virtual platform to Dr. Manoranjan Sharma. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Sir, you are audible.
Okay, I'm grateful to Dr. Meenakshi Duggal, Dr. Hardeep Kaul, Professor Rupali Agrawal, and most of all to Principal Dr. Ekta Khosla for having me with you on this important subject. I'm also thankful to Professor Mandeep Kaur who arranged for the technical details for this online platform at a short notice. I'm particularly grateful to Madam Khosla for her kind and generous words. As she said, I have participated in some programs of your institution, and I'm glad to know that the kind of pioneering, significant work you are doing in these days of multidisciplinary studies, and you are doing a really commendable work. So I must congratulate and compliment you on the excellent journey that you had so far. And I'm confident that under the dynamic and vibrant leadership of Dr. Ekta Khosla, distinguished faculty members here, and other well wishers, the college will move from strength to strength and going forward would consolidate its position in the Committee of Higher Education Institutions in Punjab. Uh, Now, let me come to the issue of union budget. My basic take is that this has obviously evoked considerable debates and discussions. My central thesis, I'll try to elaborate on it. What I propose to do here, it's already 5 past 3. So I will speak for possibly 30-35 minutes, so I can close at about 3:35 or 3:40. So we have enough time for Q&A, questions and answers, or any kind of queries. So, as I said, this issue of budget had evoked considerable discussions. My basic take is that this is a good budget which will drive balanced growth along with fiscal prudence. Now, if you place things in the Indian economy in a proper historical and comparative perspective, what you find is that Kautilya's Arthashastra, going back several centuries, first mentioned the basic concepts of a budget, and he brought to the fore the terms of revenues, expenditure, and fiscal deficit going back several centuries in India. Post independence, when we became independent on 15th August 1947. We adopted the Constitution 1950. So, in terms of the Indian Constitution and in terms of Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, the government of the day is required to place on the floor of the Parliament a statement of annual expenditures, revenues, fiscal deficit. So, in this sense, the union budget is largely seen as some kind of an accounting statement. But to my mind, it would not be entirely correct or appropriate to view it merely as an accounting statement because it provides an indication of the state of the economy, priorities of the government, and the use of instruments to realize the identified objectives, influence, direction, and pace of the economy. Hence, the budget is much more than a public statement of expected government revenues and expenditures over a period of 1 year. Now, before I come to specific issues, macro specific issues, sector specific issues, let me highlight some issues of broader concern. My basic take is that the budget should not be seen as some kind of a silo in isolation. It is a microcosm. It is a miniature model of the broader evolving Indian economy. I am reminded of a Chinese curse goes back few centuries, possibly a few thousand years, when one of the Chinese philosophers said, "May you live in interesting times." So all of us would agree here that these are interesting times post COVID. Now, as all of us are aware that 2020 was terribly bad. We were hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has sometimes been compared to the Spanish flu of 1919. So this kind of an economic and medical emergency was the first of such magnitude, of such severe repercussions for first time in about in over 100 years. Now, this COVID-19 pandemic has also sometimes been compared to the global financial crisis of October 2008, and even the Spanish flu, and even the Great Depression of 1929. But that all the data and analysis which has come in public domain, whether you look at the analysis of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Reserve Bank of India, the Niti Aayog, or any such thing, you find that this COVID-19 pandemic was far more serious, was far more severe in terms of its ramifications and repercussions, and the kind of a weakening, kind of crippling hit it caused to lives and livelihoods. It also greatly hit income, output, and employment across the development spectrum. In this kind of an overarching setting, disequilibrium became the new equilibrium, and now all of us have to adjust to the realities of what we call the new normal. Now, this was a slight introduction so that we are able to place things in a proper historical and comparative perspective. Now, if you look at the present data, uh, which forms the backdrop of this union budget, is that there seems to be a clear consensus across the board that the worst is behind us post the COVID 19, and India is on a high growth trajectory. However, there are heightened geopolitical dynamics in the wake of the Russia Ukraine war, high fuel prices, high logistics and interest cost, volatile capital flows, exchange rate volatility, the scramble for safe haven, and the attendant correction in asset prices. All these are obviously issues of concern. Now, these issues are common both to India and to the global economy. If we focus on the Indian economy, what you find is that there are concerns of high inflation, unsustainably high fiscal deficit, high unemployment rate, and the risk of a recession in several countries. Now, of late, there have been large number of analysis of the Indian economy at the multilateral level, at the global level, and there seems to be some kind of a consensus that India has emerged as a bright spot in the global economy. Uh, India will still be the second fastest economy in G20. Some of you may be aware, India has recently taken over the presidency of G20 countries, group of 20 countries, and after Saudi Arabia, it will be the second fastest, largest growing economy. And what I would like to draw your attention here to the fact that this is not just a one off kind of a measure. As per a very detailed, comprehensive analysis done by the IMF, obviously, which lends some kind of a transparency, credibility to these kind of numbers, India is expected to remain a growth outperformer in the medium term with an average GDP growth of 6.6% between fiscal years 2024 and 2026. So, in that way, India is expected to drive global growth with doubling of its GDP from $3.4 trillion now to $8.5 trillion over the next decade. There has also been thrust on investment, exports, employment, GST, corporate tax cuts, PLIs, and larger formal economy. Now, uh, but if you look at the budget, if you look at the monetary policy, if you look at other important studies on the Indian economy by various important institutions and individuals, you find that by all accounts, high growth is here to stay, and this year also will grow in a range of something like 6 to 6.5%. But I would like to. I just had some water here, so maybe there are different ways of looking at things. If you have a glass of water, you drank some water out of it. Possibly, you can say that the glass is half full. If you want to strike a positive note, if you want to strike a negative note, you can also say, and you will also be justified in saying that the glass is half empty. So when we refer to the macro numbers, I tried to give you some optimistic features. But when you do some kind of a disaggregated analysis, you do some kind of a granular analysis of numbers, what I would like to highlight some two aspects. One is that seems to be some kind of a sectoral skew. Uh, by sectoral skew, I mean some kind of an uneven growth in the Indian economy. I think Dr. Khosla mentioned that you have some industries close to Batala. So here, what we find is that growth this year is led by what is known as the BFSI sector. That means banking, financial services, and insurance, automobiles, and telecommunications. Banks have done particularly well. Uh, but some industries, I think, which are concerned to of area near Batala is that metals, oil and gas, select consumer durables have not done all that well. Another issue. So the growth has not become adequately broad based. So this was my first point. Second point, which I would also like to highlight, is that while the macro picture, while the overall picture is very good, when you do some kind of a deep dive, when you do some kind of a more detailed analysis. Like, for example, in India, there's a lot of excitement about 3 months back when we became I think in Batala, Punjab, also Delhi, it was full of all television channels and even all Delhi-based newspapers were full of the fact that it was the first page news that India became the fifth largest economy globally, and we pushed Great Britain, which once ruled us for over 200 years, to the sixth slot. Now, all this is very welcome. This is certainly welcome and shows that we are gradually coming of age. But then, as we say in English language and economics, finance, banking, commerce, sometimes the devil lies in the detail. And here, if you do look at the fine print, what you find is that as per the IMF data, as per the World Bank data, in India, per capita income still seems to be at a low level of something like $1,500. But when you look at the UK situation, to whom we have pushed from fifth law to sixth law, their per capita income is still something like $4,400. So there's a lot of catching up to do. So obviously, we should not be unaware of all these aspects. There are certain good aspects, certain not so good aspects. But despite this, we do see that India is growing at a fast rate, and this kind of a fast growth rate is here to stay. There's also been a very welcome thrust on infrastructure. So maybe possibly I would come to later, but here also let me say this infrastructure thrust on infrastructure is expected to provide significant tailwinds, significant growth impetus to the Indian economy. Let me here briefly refer to the American economy, which was devastated by the two world wars, by the Great Depression. Subsequently, America grew at fast pace, very fast pace. So obviously, the faster growth of the American economy cannot simply be attributed to one or two factors. It was a judicious mix of several factors. But it is widely agreed that America's focus on infrastructure development provided a significant thrust to the growth process. And it is commonly said, I think if you do some kind of a literature survey on the American economy, you'll find two very powerful sentences that America's bridges, roads, port build the American economy, and the American economy in turn build the roads, ports, bridges, etc. So, in economics, commerce, finance, banking, sometimes research scholars, serious students have to look at what is known as the cause and effect relationship. But here you find a two-way causal relationship in the sense that infrastructure led to faster growth of the American economy, and the American economy growth in the American economy also benefited the infrastructure sectors. In case of India, also there have been a large number of theoretical studies, a large number of empirical studies, which highlight that if you spend 1% of GDP on infrastructure projects, whether greenfield or brownfield, greenfield are absolutely new infrastructure projects. When you say brownfield projects, that means you are going to scale, you are upscaling the existing infrastructure facilities. Then 1% of it is spent on infrastructure. Uh, in GDP terms could lead to 1.5 to 2% rise in GDP. So this is again a very welcome aspect. Now let me come to some of the thrust areas. As I said earlier, the Indian economy has demonstrated resilience against the concerns of globally synchronized slowdown, unemployment, inflation, and deferred shocks of the pandemic. Whether you look for the global economy now seems to be growing at, if you look at the latest IMF data, maybe possibly at about 2%. Two economies which have evoked large discussions at the global level. If you look at the American economy, you look at the British economy, both of them have been hit by very high, unsustainably high inflation in the region of 9%, 9.5%, which is a 40-year high, 50-year high in both countries. So obviously, most of the countries all over the world are going through a very difficult phase. In case of American economy, one important concern has once again surfaced, which first came to the fore sometime in late 1970, what is known as the concern of stagflation. Stagflation basically is a combination of two words, stagnation plus inflation. So this could be a dreaded doomsday scenario. So obviously, this is the broader macroeconomic backdrop to the budget. Against this kind of a background, the FM in this year's budget has focused on seven priorities. These are inclusive development, reaching the last mile, agriculture and investment, unleashing potential, green growth, youth power, and the financial sector. Now, let me come to one aspect of the budget which evokes the maximum discussion in almost all budgets, the fiscal deficit. So, now fiscal deficit evokes a lot of discussion because it is widely regarded as the best available summary indicator of the macroeconomic impact of the budget. I am reminded of a very powerful sentence by former finance secretary. Subsequently, I think he became a professor at NUS, one of the top universities in the world, National University of Singapore. Uh, Dr. Acharya wrote, I think he wrote about 20 years back, but this is still valid and contextually significant, is that uh, uh, high fiscal deficits tend to crowd out private investment, increase inflationary potential, weaken the balance of payments, render financial sector reforms more difficult, and impose a serious burden on future generations. So this is the overall impact why fiscal deficit has to be considered very seriously. In India, we have long been concerned. So I'll just take a minute to explain what is the kind of work which has been done. Some of you may be aware that the small team which unleashed the process of economic reforms way back in 1991. Dr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister, Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao, prime minister, and the finance secretary then was N.K. Singh, a very competent, bright IAS officer. So in 2003, he was discharged with this responsibility, and under the leadership of Mr. N.K. Singh, they came up with a very powerful act called FRBM Act, Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, and it was indicated that they had to indicate some kind of a glide path. By glide path, we mean that gradually you have to go down from 6% to 5 to 4 to 3%, something like that. So obviously, in India, we have long been cautious of the need to contain fiscal deficit within manageable proportions. But in the last 2 years, because of the crippling impact of COVID 19, these concerns of fiscal deficit were largely given a go by. We ended up last year also with a fiscal deficit of something like 6.4. Prior to that, we are close to 7%. But now that in India, growth is gradually gaining traction, we must be focused on the needs of a prudent and a judicious fiscal policy. And now, let me turn to some good news story, that in the sense that if you see that for the financial year 22-23, That means for financial year ending 31st March 23. The tax collections have been very robust. Last year, the FM had estimated that the tax collections, both direct and indirect taxes put together, could be something in the region of 27.5 lakh crore. But the present indication are that um, these numbers are likely to be overshot by a significant margin. In case of direct taxes, the estimate was that tax collections for this year ending 31st March 2023 could be around 12.5 lakh crore. But the present indications are that we are likely to exceed 14 lakh crore. Now we come to the indirect taxes. Indirect taxes, obviously, there has been some kind of a month to month volatility, and some months it has gone to 1,60,000 crore, 170,000 crore. Some months it has dropped to about 1,40,000 crore. But on if you take a mean level, average level, for last several months we are clocking in GST numbers have been kicking in at something like 1,50,000 crore on a regular, on a sustained basis. So 1,50,000 into 12, 12 months of the year, financial year. So we come up with 18 lakh of GST plus 14 lakh. So obviously this kind of a 32 lakh, we expect that there will be very good collection. Fiscal deficit, which had hit a high of 9.5%. That was an abnormally bad year, and because of the macroeconomic compulsions in the year 2020 to 2021, now this year it's likely to be 6.4%. The FM madam Nirmala Sitaraman, she has projected next year we could go at 5.9%, and for FY26, this number could be 4.5%. So these are very welcome numbers, and I'm confident the Indian economic planners, policymakers are conscious of the significance of remaining on the glide path, and gradually we will see some kind of a further decline in the fiscal deficit numbers. And the issue of fiscal deficit, which I'd like to highlight, is that I don't wish to score any political points here, but in the last government headed by Dr. Manmohan Singh, if you go through the budget documents, you'll find that there were several cases of deferred expenditure, particularly in case of oil bonds. So instead of these budget numbers were not very credible. Now, if you look at the present budget, the last 6, 7 budgets, these numbers evoke greater transparency, greater credibility, because there are no cases of off-budget items. Now, when you look at the market borrowing is estimated at rupees 15.43 lakh crore. So obviously, it will come from very large number of sources. Uh, Now, I think I referred to it earlier also that one very welcome aspect of this year's budget is that capital expenditure is projected to increase by 33% over the last year. So this is a very welcome jump, and the ratio of capex stands for capacity expansion to GDP, which rose to 2.7 in the year 2022-2023, is estimated at 3.9% in this year. So this is again a very welcome thing, because let me briefly refer to a lot of theoretical studies, also empirical findings. What you find is that the government has two ways of spending money. One is the on the revenue side, the other is on the capital side. So when the government of India spends money on the revenue side, the kind of multiplier that works is something like zero point 0.8 or at the most 0.9. So when you spend 100 rupees, that revenue multiplier will give you only 90 rupees or even 80 rupees. In case of capex, what happens is that in the first year, the multiplier effect is something like 1.25, or 1 is to 2.5 or something like this. And after 4 years, it could even be 5 times, 5x. So, in simple words, if you spend 100 rupees on capex, then this could lead to a growth, a multiple. This will have a multiplier effect of 250 rupees. So, obviously, this kind of a thrust on infrastructure, on capex is very welcome, and this is going to provide a significant impetus to the growth and structural transformation of the Indian economy. And the welcome aspect of the budget is that the government, the FM has projected about 60,000 rupees crores to 60,000 crores to come from the disinvestment. This is again a very welcome feature that the estimates are quite realistic and conservative. Last year, if you recall, there were two big ticket disinvestments planned. One was the Air India, which obviously went through. The other was the LIC, Life Insurance Corporation of India, in which the government had planned to go in for some kind of a dilution of equity. That did not happen. And I think the government took the right decision to tell it, because when you're thinking of diluting the equity of iconic companies in India like LIC of Life Insurance Corporation of India, you are, in a way, if I may use a strong expression, you are selling something like a family jewel. So you must wait for the right time. Just because you have given in the budget projections that you will dilute your equity, you should not be in a hurry to do it unless they are pressing macroeconomic and other social compulsions. So you must wait for it to fetch the right price. So to my mind, since the stock market conditions were at that time not very good, so I think the government took the right decision. This year, I think the government will go ahead with about 60,000 crores of disinvestment, monetization of assets, whatever name you call. So I think this is again a welcome measure. Now, let me come to MSME. There are a large number of welcome measures such as presumptive tax, ease of doing business for MSME, and all these are very significant because if you look at the broader Indian economy, you find that 95% of all industrial units in the country belong to the MSME. They account for 40% of exports, 40% of manufacturing, and they are the largest source of employment in the country, next only to Indian agriculture. So, if you remove Indian agriculture, this MSME is the largest source of employment. So, measures such as deduction for expenditure incurred on payments made, ease of doing business, relaxations under the presumptive tax, all these are very welcome measures. Now, infrastructure I've already referred to. Now, let me briefly refer to the agriculture sector. Punjab is also very significantly contributed over the years to the growth and transformation of the agriculture sector. Now, but let me highlight one issue of what we call, in case of the Indian economy, in case of or that just there has been an asymmetric process and pattern of agriculture development in India over the years. Now, since this is a strong statement, let me try to explain why do we say that the development of agriculture in India has been asymmetric, has been uneven. Now, if you place things in a proper historical and comparative perspective, if you look at the position way back in 1950, you will find that agriculture accounted for something like 50% of India's GDP. Now, obviously, this number has shrunk to about 20% now. And if you look at the pre-COVID numbers, agriculture had shrunk even much more to about, let us say, 15, 16%. During the COVID periods and periods were subsequent to the COVID crisis, uh, because there was severe hit in terms of industries and services, and agriculture sector showed some dynamism, some resilience, so there's some relative change. But still, on the whole, agriculture still accounts for something like 19-20% to the GDP. So this is one side of the one side of the issue. Now, if you look at the other side, if you look at the employment, agriculture still accounts for, according to the latest data, which is available in public domain, 56-57% of people are still employed, or perhaps a more appropriate expression would be underemployed in agriculture. So obviously, one of the focus areas of the government of India, state governments, has been to shift people from agriculture to the more productive sectors of industry and services. Services is by and large the most predominant sector in the country today, with about well over 60% coming from services. So, in agriculture, we have also to look at a more broad-based sense. Agriculture does not mean agriculture, but the full term used in the economic survey and everywhere, Reserve Bank of India publication, is what is called agriculture and allied activities. So, there are certain activities which uh, have larger element of value addition are, let us say, minor irrigation, fisheries, poultry, dairy, piggery, farm mechanization, tractors. So all these issues also need to be given some kind of a thrust. So towards this end of improving production and productivity, also equity considerations in Indian agriculture, the FM has done well to focus on digital public infrastructure for agriculture accelerator fund, and thrust to millets cultivation. All these are welcome measures. Now, the FM has also proposed several measures, changes in amendments to the Banking Regulation Act 1949 and the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934 to improve the functions and working of the commercial banks. Banks have obviously been doing well. Two important benchmarks of assessing the performance of the bank relate to the kind of profits they are able to generate. And according to some indications, bank may generate a total profits of something like 1 lakh crores, which is likely to be a very huge number. And the issue is that improved performance of banks is reflected in the fact that NPAs, defaults, delinquencies, non-performing assets, this gross non-performing assets have already dropped to a 7-year low of 5% in September 2022. Now, the Reserve Bank of India has projected their very comprehensive report, biannual reports of the Reserve Bank of India, and it suggests that all of you, if you get some time, please go. It's easily available on the net. It's published twice a year in January and July, called the FSR, Financial Stability Reports of the Reserve Bank of India, and they have also predicted that there could be a further decline in both the GNPA, gross non-performing assets, and net non-performing assets, unless there are some more adverse shocks to the banking sector. So, taxation, as I said earlier, the numbers look very robust. This year we have done exceptionally well. Going forward, the number, a lot of concerns about fiscal deficit, about the realizability of the numbers given in the budget. They have evoked some kind of a discussion that how far these numbers are credible, how far are these numbers achievable. So, my take is that these numbers are quite conservative and they are fully achievable, because next year we are looking at a GDP growth of something in the region of 6 to 6.5%. And okay, even if you take the lower band 6%, and inflation is likely to be around 4.5, 5%. So 6 plus 5, that means 11%. And uh, these increase in tax collections are based on a factor of 10.5%. So here the nominal growth could easily exceed 11.5%, because this is basically a combination of two factors: the real growth in GDP terms and also the rate of inflation. So obviously, I think this has been doing well. Now, energy has been a very focused area for all finance ministers in the last few years. There has been a lot of thrust on power sector. So, but what makes this budget different from the other budgets is there is a lot of focus on green energy, with energy storage, battery energy storage systems, priority capital investments towards energy transition, net zero objectives, energy security. So all these are very welcome steps which will facilitate India's move towards sustainable development, reduce environmental pollution, degradation, meet the challenges of climate change and some other things. Now, with this, let me come to my final concluding observation so that we have some time left for question answers. Um, my overall assessment would be that given the devastating hit to the Indian economy by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the fact that now growth is gaining traction, there has to be a greater thrust on increasing investment, creating externalities towards improving economic environment and enhancing productivity for sustained economic growth. In the ultimate analysis, there are basically four drivers of the Indian economy, and these drivers are domestic consumption, government expenditure, private investment, and exports. To a limited extent, all these measures are given some kind of emphasis in this kind of a budget. So I think on the whole, the FM madam has done an excellent job. In sum, given the manifold global and domestic challenges, the budget adopted a broad based development strategy with a renewed thrust on economic development and inclusive development. To my mind, however, there could have been uh, a sharper focus on health and education at the present juncture. So, thank you very much for having me with you all here today. I think I will stop here because, as I said earlier, when I started, I will not go beyond 3:40. We are already at 3:40. So I think normally I never try to exceed my time limit. So I'll stop here so that if there are any queries, if there are any kind of questions you would like to pose, please go ahead. I'll try my best to respond to your queries. Thank you for having me with you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any queries or any questions from any side?
Yes, ma'am. A very good afternoon, sir. My name is Praniti. So my question is that financial minister she has proposes to make new tax regime a default option. So my question is that according to you, how do you think that it is going to helpful for the individuals? Like whether they should go for the new one or they should continue with their old tax regime?
Well, thank you, madam. It's difficult to give a clear answer. What would be beneficial for each individual? You have to look at your income. You have to look at your investment pattern, how much money goes into PF, whether you've taken a housing loan, some other thing. So it will vary from person to person and situation to situation. It is not possible for me to give a direct. Maybe you could use the services of a chartered accountant. He or she would be able to tell you better. But this move to new tax regimes is welcome, and this is in line with global best practices. What has happened in India was traditionally, for example, let us say you're working in a college, you're working in Punjab University, you're getting a monthly salary of 2 lakh rupees. But then entire income is not subject to taxes. If you save in identified investment channels such as a national saving certificate, if you contribute to PF some additional, if you take an investment in PPF, all these were exempt. This was at that time considered to be necessary to direct savings into desired investment channels. Uh, Now, in line with, but if you look at the situation all around us, all over the world, whether you look at America, France, England, Australia, America, everywhere, all of us get only one paycheck, and on that paycheck, on that basis, you pay taxes. So this is a good attempt just to simplify taxation, rationalize taxation, and also help us to move with, in sync with, in line with the global best practices. So I think the FM has taken a right step by aligning the India's tax system to the best practices available in most parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sir, I'm Ian Goyal, speaking from Batala on MSME units. Sir, you have said in your sir अभी आपने बताया कि MSME units के बारे में तो सर हम आपसे ये जानना चाहते हैं कि सारे देश में अपने 6 करोड़ से ज्यादा MSME यूनिट्स हैं सर, और 97% जो एम्प्लॉयमेंट है वो MSME यूनिट्स में है। इसमें जो माइक्रो है वो सबसे ज्यादा है सर, उसमें सबसे ज्यादा एम्प्लॉयमेंट है सर। लेकिन सर सबसे दुख की बात यह है कि जो ये बजट आया है उसमें 9,000 करोड़ रुपीस जो है वो CGFT जो MSME से उसके लिए है। और जो सर हमारा अपने यहाँ से मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, इट इज इन बटाला सर, इट इज इन पंजाब, एंड जो एक्चुअल लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल है विद पाकिस्तान दैट इज 30 किलोमीटर फ्रॉम आवर इंडस्ट्रियल यूनिट्स सर। सर कोई भी हमारे जो सेंट्रल मिनिस्टर साथी हैं वो भी और पंजाब सरकार भी कोई भी यहाँ पर बड़ी इंडस्ट्री लगाने के तैयार नहीं है जिसको कि आउटसोर्सिंग हो सके फॉर द MSME यूनिट्स, पर्टिकुलरली फॉर द माइक्रो यूनिट्स। सर जो हमें सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट के हमने बहुत रिप्रेजेंटेशन भेजी थी अपनी इंडस्ट्री एसोसिएशन से, लेकिन कोई भी मीटअप नहीं हो सकी। सर हमारा ये क्वेश्चन है कि ये जो माइक्रो एंड स्मॉल यूनिट्स हैं वो भी जो बॉर्डर हमारे डिस्ट्रिक्ट से पंजाब के, वहाँ के सर हम इससे कैसे सरवाइव कर सकते हैं? क्योंकि एक तो हम जो हमारे एक्चुअल प्लांट्स हैं जहाँ से हमारे फाउंडेशन यूनिट्स का मटेरियल आता है वो 3,000 किलोमीटर पर है, उसका फ्रेट लगता है। जो उसके लिए कोयला आता है वो भी 3,000 किलोमीटर उसका फ्रेट लगता है। जो हम फिनिश गुड्स बनाते हैं वो हम पाकिस्तान 30 किलोमीटर पर तो भेज नहीं सकते, वो भी सारी इंडिया में भेजने होते हैं सर, उसको अगेन फ्रेट लगता है सर हमारे कस्टमर को। ऊपर से 18% GST है सर MSME यूनिट्स पर, वो उससे और भी महंगा हो जाता है सर। हमारा जो प्रोडक्ट है ना सर वो इतना ज्यादा कॉस्टली हो जाता है कि अब जो दूसरी स्टेट्स हैं जैसे कर्नाटका है, गुजरात है, महाराष्ट्र है, वहां से हमारा जो बायर है उसको सस्ता मिल जाता है। ऑनलाइन हम सब कोशिश करते हैं कि भाई हमारा जो प्रोडक्ट है वो कॉम्पिटिटिव हो जाए, लेकिन हो नहीं पाता सर, कोई फ्रेट सब्सिडी नहीं है, कुछ नहीं है सर। सर दूसरी बात ये है कि सर मेरा कि ये जो कमर्शियलाइज बैंक है प्लस जो हमारे जो प्राइवेट बैंक है ना सर, वो CGD अपना CGFT और जो MSME के लिए है उस पर वो सर गारंटी मांगते हैं सर। सर ये हमने अपने जो हमारी जो डिस्ट्रिक्ट की हमारी जो बैंकर्स कमेटी है प्लस जो हमारा लीड बैंक मैनेजर्स है वहां पर हमारी DC से मीटिंग्स बुलाते हैं, हम कहते हैं सर ये गारंटी मांगते हैं। वो कहते हैं जी हमने गारंटी के बगैर पैसे देने ही नहीं है। सर एक माइक्रो यूनिट है वो कहाँ से गारंटी देगा सर? ये बैंक्स वाले तो कोई हेल्प करते नहीं है, गवर्नमेंट भी कोई हेल्प नहीं कर रही, ना इधर पंजाब कर रही है ना सेंटर कर रही है। सर पैसे तो अलॉट कर दिए 9,000 करोड़, लेकिन 9,000 करोड़, लेकिन सर वो हमें मिलेंगे कैसे? हम अपनी डाइवर्सिफिकेशन कैसे करेंगे? हम अपनी मॉडर्नाइजेशन कैसे करेंगे? हम अपना जो प्रोडक्ट है उसको हम कॉम्पिटिटिव कैसे बना सकते हैं? सर 97% जो एम्प्लॉयमेंट है देश की वो माइक्रो यूनिट्स में है सर। तो माइक्रो यूनिट ही सबसे ज्यादा इग्नोर्ड है सर। और यहाँ से जब तोप चलती है तो सबसे पहले उसका गोला तो बटाला कर गिरता है सर, पंजाब में हमें कर गिरता है। तो यहाँ पर हमें कोई पूछता नहीं है सर, और ना कोई सेंटर ध्यान दे रहा है तो ना कोई पंजाब गवर्नमेंट ध्यान दे रही है सर, जबकि 97% एम्प्लॉयमेंट हम कर रहे हैं सर। सर हम कैसे चला रहे हैं? सिसक हम अपना यूनिट चला रहे हैं, कोई ध्यान नहीं दे रहा सर। तो सर हम ये चाहते हैं कि एक तो ये हो जाए कि भी जो माइक्रो एंड स्मॉल MSME है उसकी तरफ ध्यान दिया जाए सर, और जो बैंक्स हैं वो हेल्प करें, गवर्नमेंट हेल्प करे। और दूसरी बात सर ये है कि ये जो सिस्टम है इसका बैंक्स का इसको क्या बोलते हैं सर, वो बनाना कि भी आपका वो खराब हो गया,
NPA
सिंबल खराब हो गया, सिंबल। सर व्हाट इज दिस सिंबल सर? हमारे MSME के लिए क्या जरूरत है सिंबल की सर? हमने कौन से इतना अरबों रुपए लिए हुए हैं जो अडवाणी ने लिए कि जिससे 8 लाख करोड़ रुपए का नुकसान हो गया। किसी ने 1 करोड़ लिया होगा, किसी ने 50 लाख लिया होगा। इसके लिए सिंबल की क्या जरूरत है सर? Why this banks are asking for simple sir? And sir, we people are the most badly affected sir। राम सर आपका आज हमने आपकी बात सुनी, बहुत अच्छी बात आपने जो कही है सर, जो हमारा बजट पेश हुआ है हम उसका तो वेलकम करते ही हैं, लेकिन सर वी आर द अफेक्टेड पीपल। हम चाहते हैं कि माइक्रो एंड स्मॉल इंडस्ट्रीज के लिए जिसके पास 97% एम्प्लॉयमेंट है उसके लिए कुछ ना कुछ किया जाए सर, वो कुछ नहीं हो रहा सर। और बैंक्स कोई हेल्प नहीं कर रहे, गवर्नमेंट कोई हेल्प नहीं कर रही। सेंटर सर यहाँ पर हमारे एक सेंटर मिनिस्टर आए थे, उन्होंने हमें बुलाया था, कहने लगे रोज तो ड्रोन आते हैं तो इंडस्ट्री हम कहाँ से लगाएंगे? सर थर्ड पोजीशन ये है सर कि अभी सारे देश में 25% सर जो एग्रीकल्चर इम्प्लीमेंट्स है ना सर वो चेंज ओवर हुए हैं सर। 75% अभी होने हैं सर। उसके लिए हमने पंजाब एग्रीकल्चर यूनिवर्सिटी से रिक्वेस्ट करी है कि हमें बताइए तो सही कि क्या हेल्प हो सकती है। हमने सर अपने सीएम से कहा कि बटाला में हमें एक इंडस्ट्रियल पार्क ही दे दीजिए, यहाँ पर एग्रीकल्चर इम्प्लीमेंट्स यूनिट बनाने वाले यूनिट्स लग जाएं। 75% टर्नओवर होने वाली है सारे देश में सर अभी एग्रीकल्चर में, जैसे अभी आप बता रहे थे सर। उसके लिए अगर वो लग जाते हैं, कम से कम हमारा जो यहाँ पर मशीन टूल इंडस्ट्री है उनको सर आउटसोर्सिंग हो जाएगी, जो फाउंड्री का मटेरियल लगेगा उसकी आउटसोर्सिंग हो जाएगी, कुछ तो हेल्प होना सर। लेकिन बहाना ये बनता है कि रोज तो ड्रोन आ रहे हैं, कभी नशे के आ रहे हैं, कभी हथियारों के आ रहे हैं, कौन यहाँ पर देगा सर। यहाँ तो हमें बता दिया जाए कि ठीक है गो टू पाकिस्तान, यहाँ बता दिया जाए कि हम हिंदुस्तान की हिस्सा ही नहीं है सर। सर कोई हमारी बात सुनने वाला नहीं। अगर हम कहते हैं कि हमें पार्क दे दीजिए, अगर सेंट्रल मिनिस्टर कहता है नहीं देना, पंजाब वाले कोई नहीं सुनते। अभी अभी न्यूज़पेपर से हमने ये पढ़ा कि 2800 करोड़ रुपए का टाटा वाले स्टील प्लांट लुधियाना में लगा रहे हैं सर। लुधियाना में लगाने हैं सर, बटाला में क्यों नहीं लग सकता सर? वो टाटा वाले बटाला में क्यों नहीं लगाते सर? यहाँ पर माइक्रो स्मॉल इंडस्ट्री है सारी सर। सर हम आपसे ये जानना चाहते हैं प्लीज सर, अगर आप कोई हेल्प कर सकते हैं, कुछ हो सकते हो तो माइक्रो एंड स्मॉल तरफ की ध्यान दीजिए, जिनके पास 97% एम्प्लॉयमेंट है। जो सीजीटीएफ स्कीम है सर, उसके लिए जो भी गवर्नमेंट ने प्रोविजन की है वो बैंक्स बिना गारंटी के पैसे दें सर। हमारी डाइवर्सिफिकेशन हो, हमारे जो प्रोडक्ट्स हैं एंड प्रोडक्ट्स हैं वो सस्ते हों, ताकि हम सारे इंडिया के इंडस्ट्री के साथ कम्पीट कर सके। और सर एग्रीकल्चर का 75% का सर अभी स्कोप है, हमें इंडस्ट्रियल एक एग्रीकल्चर पार्क दे दिया जाए, जिससे सर हमारा कम से कम हमारी आउटसोर्सिंग हो सके और हमारी फाउंड्री यूनिट्स की भी, हमारी मशीन टूल इंडस्ट्री भी। ये सर हमारे क्वेश्चन है सर आपसे सर।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपके सवालों के लिए। तो मैं कुछ आपके सवालों का कुछ रिस्पॉन्स देना चाहूंगा। कुछ तो क्लैरिफिकेशन, जैसे कि आपने बोला कि बैंक्स गारंटी के लिए इंसिस्ट कर रहे हैं, तो आपकी जानकारी बहुत अच्छी है। मैं भी इस क्षेत्र में एमएसएमई मेरा बहुत पसंदीदा एरिया है। मैं इसमें करीब 30-35 साल से काम कर रहा हूँ, तो मुझे भी आपकी समस्याओं की काफी वाकफियत है, काफी जानकारी है। मेरा पीएचडी भी इसी पे है और मैं एम्पिरिकल एविडेंस में मैं कई राज्यों में गया हूँ, यूपी में, बिहार में, पंजाब में, हरियाणा में, कर्नाटक में, और मैंने खुद देखा है कि जानने की कोशिश की आपकी एमएसएमईज की क्या समस्याएं हैं और उनका क्या समाधान निकल सकता है। तो आपने बहुत सारे सवाल उठाए हैं और सारे सवालों का जवाब देना मेरे पास मुमकिन नहीं है, लेकिन फिर भी मैं कुछ मुद्दों पे आपके रिस्पॉन्ड करना चाहूंगा। आपने बोला बैंकर्स ये गारंटी मांग रहे हैं, तो जो भी कर रहा है आप उसको बता सकते हैं कि आप गलत कर रहे हैं, आपके खिलाफ डिस्प्लिनरी एक्शन हो सकता है। काफी सालों से आपको तो मालूम होगा, जब आप इतने दिन से बिजनेस कर रहे हैं, सीजीटीएमएसए की स्कीम है और वो जो ट्रेड गारंटी स्कीम है खास करके एमएसएमई बॉर्डर्स के लिए, उसमें गारंटी लेना बिल्कुल मना ही नहीं बल्कि ऑलमोस्ट गुनाह है। उसका एक बहुत स्मॉल फीस लगती है और उसमें आपको किसी तरह की कोई गारंटी नहीं चाहिए, कोई कोलैटरल नहीं चाहिए। एमएसएमई में जो तकरीबन सबसे अहम मुद्दा उठता है कि गारंटी से भी ज्यादा मुश्किल चीज है कोलैटरल का, कि आपको बोलते हैं कि आप ये साहब लैंड एंड बिल्डिंग गिरवी रखो, आप इसका एनएससी दो, आप एलआईसी लो, डायरेक्टर्स की गारंटी लो। तो इस केस में एमएसएमई लेंडिंग में आप बैंकर्स को भी बैंकर्स को कोई अगर बदमाशी कर रहा है, आप खुद भी एक बार, क्योंकि आप तो बहुत पढ़े लिखे, बहुत होशियार व्यक्ति हैं, बिजनेसमैन है, काम करें, आप एक बार मेरी बातों पे नहीं जाइए, आप एक गूगल चेक कर लीजिए सीजीटीएमएस स्कीम है जो भारत सरकार की, और वो नई चीज नहीं है, मेरा ख्याल है तकरीबन कम से कम 20-25 साल से है। तो उसके तहत बैंकर्स को गारंटी लेना ये सब मना है बिल्कुल। दूसरी
वो नहीं मानते सर, वो नहीं मानते। सीजीटीएमएस के लिए हमने बहुत लेवल पर बात कर ली है, बैंक्स नहीं मानते सर, वो देते नहीं है सर। हमारे
जोनल ऑफिस उसको कंप्लेंट करिए, जोनल
ऑफिस कहते हैं आरबी को भी लिख दीजिए,
वो लोग चार्जशीट सस्पेंड हो जाएंगे, कुछ डिसमिस भी हो सकते हैं।
सर वो कहते हैं आरबीआई को भी लिख दीजिए, हम नहीं देंगे जब तक गारंटी नहीं देंगे सर।
नहीं,
हमने लिखा है सर, कोई एक्शन नहीं हुआ सर।
बैंकिंग ओम्बड्समैन भी एक होता है हर स्टेट कैपिटल में। चंडीगढ़ में आपका एक बैंकिंग ओम्बड्समैन होगा, रिजर्व बैंक का
वो स्टेट लेवल का है सर, स्टेट लेवल की बैंकर्स कमेटी है सर, वहां पर भी पुटअप किया लेकिन कोई एक्शन नहीं है सर।
आप ये एक बार फिर से और एक दो मुद्दे जो मेरी समझ से जो आए हैं उनमें मैं आपका रिस्पॉन्ड करना चाहता हूँ। दूसरा, आपने बोला कि एमएसएमई को तवज्जो दिया जाता है लेकिन उसमें जो एमएसई सेक्टर है, माइक्रो स्मॉल, उसके ऊपर तवज्जो नहीं दे पा रहे हैं, उसके ऊपर ध्यान नहीं दे पा रहे। तो इसमें भी आप थोड़ा फॉलो अप करिए अपने बैंकर्स की। भारत सरकार के दिशा निर्देश हैं, गाइडलाइंस है। मैं अभी 3 साल पहले तक कैनरा बैंक में था, तो मैंने खुद देखे, मुझे लगता नहीं पिछले 3 साल में कोई बदलाव हुआ होगा। तो वो सेम चीजें कि उसमें बताया गया है कि एमएसएमई में अगर 100 रुपए कर्जा दिया जाता है बैंकों के द्वारा, तो उसका 60 रुपए एमएसएमई को, माइक्रो और स्मॉल यूनिट्स को जाना चाहिए। और हर एक बैंक को का वो परफॉर्मेंस फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर मॉनिटर करती है। दूसरी बात ये भी है कि एमएसई सेक्टर का जो आपका आउटस्टैंडिंग है सभी का मिला के, उसमें हर साल, जिसको हम बोलते हैं YOY, ईयर ऑन ईयर, उसमें आउटस्टैंडिंग में, क्योंकि आप रिपेमेंट भी बड़ी तादाद में करते हैं तो इसलिए आउटस्टैंडिंग, तो वो हर साल 20% आउटस्टैंडिंग में ग्रोथ होता है। तो आप बैंकर से ये नहीं तो आप बोलेंगे तो मैं तो अब 2 साल से 3 साल से कैनरा बैंक में नहीं हूँ, तो लेकिन ये आपको दिशा निर्देश गाइडलाइंस मेरा ख्याल है इंटरनेट पे भी मिल जाएंगे, बाहर भी मिल जाएंगे मिनिस्ट्री के साइट पे, तो इसको आप बैंकर से फॉलो अप कर सकते हैं। अब एक और बात मैं रिस्पॉन्ड करना चाहूंगा कि आपने बोला कि आपके साथ काफी समस्याएं, तो जैसा कि मैंने आपके सामने अपनी बात रखी कि मैं तकरीबन 35-40 साल से बहुत गहन अध्ययन स्टडी भी कर रहा हूँ और इंपीरिकल एविडेंस गांव-गांव में जाके मैंने ये काम देखा है। बहुत सारा फील्ड सर्वे किया। तो एक ये एमएसएमई सेक्टर, जैसा कि काफी कुछ मेरा व्यक्तिगत अनुभव है कि उसमें जो समस्याएं आती हैं बेसिकली चार मोटे हिस्से हैं इसके। और ये बहुत दुर्भाग्य की बात है कि जो 1950 में भी यही 4 हिस्से थे और अब हम 2022, 23, 24 में भी ये जो 4 प्रॉब्लम बेसिकली जो सेगमेंट्स हैं एमएसएमई इंडस्ट्रीज के, उसको 4 टुकड़ों में आप बांट सकते हैं: क्रेडिट, मार्केटिंग, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर और टेक्नोलॉजी। तो कई जगह पे इन्होंने बोला है कि क्रेडिट तो काफी कुछ स्टैट्यूटरी क्रेडिट हो गया है। आपने बहुत अच्छी कोशिश की, थोड़ा बहुत आप और कोशिश करें तो जैसे जो कोलैटरल कोशिश की वो मिल सकती है। और कई जगह मैं 12-13 साल साउथ इंडिया में भी मैंने काम किया, कर्नाटक में, बैंगलोर में। तो आप भी जहां तक, हर जगह मुमकिन नहीं हो सकता, पता नहीं आपकी इंडस्ट्री में मुमकिन है या नहीं। आप टेक्नोलॉजी को लेकर के कुछ नए टेक्नोलॉजिकल प्रोसेस को लेके अपनी प्रोडक्शन को बढ़ा सकते हैं, इफिशिएंसी को बढ़ा सकते हैं। मैंने खुद व्यक्तिगत तौर पे देखा है कि बैंगलोर में जो इंडस्ट्रियल यूनिट्स हैं, जो इंडस्ट्रियल एरिया है, वो कई नई तकनीक का इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं। तो आप एक इसको भी कंसिडर कर सकते हैं। बॉर्डर डिस्ट्रिक्ट होने के नाते आपके साथ बहुत सारे डिसएडवांटेजेस हैं। अभी पाकिस्तान से भी बात चल रही, हिंदुस्तान भी शायद पाकिस्तान में, जैसे कि आपने देखा रोज टीवी पे आ रहा है, अखबारों में आ रहा है, और काफी बदहाली की हालत है। और अगर हम हिंदुस्तान से कंपेयर करें तो शायद वो उनकी हालत हमसे बहुत ज्यादा, इसीलिए बार बार पाकिस्तान की तरफ से बात चल रही है कि वो गोला बारूद फेंकेंगे और वो इंडिया से ट्रेड खोलना चाहते हैं। तो अगर ये ट्रेड का रास्ता खुल गया, व्यापार, आपका बॉर्डर खुल गया, तो मेरा ख्याल है उससे भी, जैसे कि आप बोल रहे हैं कि आपको माल मंगाने के लिए, माल बेचने के लिए 30,000 किलोमीटर, तो शायद आपको 30 किलोमीटर पे बॉर्डर है, 100 किलोमीटर में आपको रॉ मटेरियल्स के लिए भी मार्केट मिले, फिनिश गुड्स पे भी मार्केट मिले। काफी इस पे चर्चा हो रही। ये एक पॉलिटिकल फैसला है, कब तक होगा मैं नहीं कह सकता, लेकिन अभी चूंकि पाकिस्तान की हालत बहुत ही खराब है और हम लोग जो नंबर्स देख रहे हैं, तो वो पॉलिटिकल प्रेशर भी उनके प्राइम मिनिस्टर, प्रेसिडेंट लगातार भारत सरकार से बातचीत कर रही है। तो उनका बहुत ज्यादा रिक्वेस्ट है कि अब वो टेररिज्म का कोई काम नहीं करेंगे, अपने आप को इससे अलग रखेंगे, क्योंकि इंडिया ने बोला था कि दोनों चीजें एक साथ नहीं चल सकती। आप एक तरफ दहशतगर्दी भी करो और दूसरी तरफ आप ट्रेड की भी बात करो। तो मुझे उम्मीद है इसका भी जल्द, लेकिन आपने जो सवाल उठाए मैं पूरी तरह आपकी प्रॉब्लम से वाकिफ हूँ। अपने स्तर पे मैं जहां भी हो सकेगा आपकी आवाजों को, आपकी समस्याओं को, आपकी आवाज को और बुलंद करने की कोशिश करूंगा। मुझे व्यक्तिगत तौर पे मालूम है आपका काफी प्रॉब्लम है MS का, और लेकिन हम सब लोग इन ज्यादातर प्रॉब्लम से वाकिफ है, और मैं भी जितनी ये कर सकता हूँ वो करूंगा। सिविल स्कोर का भी आपने सवाल उठाया, सिविल में ये ज्यादा गुंजाइश नहीं है। ये बेसिकली हम लोग पूरी दुनिया में हम लोग ब्रॉडली एक कैपिटलिस्ट मॉडल फॉलो कर रहे हैं, तो बहुत सारी खामियां हैं। सोशलिस्ट मॉडल पहले चाइना में था, रशिया में था, सब जगह कोलैप्स कर गया। तो कैपिटलिस्ट मॉडल में ये लोन पे बहुत तवज्जो दिया जाता है, बहुत इम्फेसिस होता है उसमें। लोन में अब पूरी दुनिया में एक कॉन्सेप्ट है कि आपकी क्रेडिट हिस्ट्री बिल्ड होती है, कि आपका साथ पुराना रिकॉर्ड कितना कैसा है, कि अगर आपने लोन लिया और उसको वापस नहीं किया, उसको डिफॉल्ट किया बाद में, या फिर वन टाइम सेटलमेंट वगैरह भी होगा, तो आपका सिविल स्कोर खराब हो जाता है। बैंक जब फ्रेश लोन देते हैं तो उनकी भी कुछ मजबूरियां हैं कि उनका वो कहना है कि अगर 750 से कम का स्कोर आता है तो बैंक को लोन देने में थोड़ी दिक्कत हो सकती। कहीं छोटी मोटी चीजों में, जैसे कि अगर आपका कोई क्रेडिट कार्ड है और क्रेडिट कार्ड पे आपने समय पे पेमेंट नहीं किया, तो वो छोटा मोटा बैंक मैनेजर के पास डिस्क्रिप्शन रहता है। लेकिन बाकी अगर आपने कंपनी के नाम पे कोई लोन लिया है तो उसका समय पे आप किसी भी वजह से, पारिवारिक कारणों से, इंडस्ट्रियल कारणों से समय पे भुगतान नहीं कर पाए, तो इसको बैंक की भाषा में बोलते हैं, वित्तीय भाषा में बोलते हैं, आपका क्रेडिट हिस्ट्री खराब हो गई। और अगर ये पूरी दुनिया में सिस्टम है कि क्रेडिट हिस्ट्री खराब हो गई, जिसको इंडिया में बोलते हैं सिविल स्कोर, तो फिर आपको फ्रेश लोन मिलने में दिक्कत हो सकती है। लेकिन आपने बहुत सारे अहम मुद्दे उठाए, मैं बहुत सालों से इन चीजों पे काम कर रहा हूँ, और मैं आपको एश्योर करता हूँ मैं आगे भी आपके बिहाफ पे, अपने बिहाफ पे, और हम लोग जितनी मीटिंग में जाते हैं, गवर्नमेंट ऑफिसर से मिलते हैं, इंडस्ट्री एसोसिएशन से मिलते हैं, MSME यूनिट से आपकी आवाज और बुलंद करते रहेंगे। शुक्रिया।
धन्यवाद सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर।
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, my name is Neha, and my question is, according to Niti Aayog, India's research and development expenditure is one of the lowest in the world. So, what steps should be taken to enhance research and development in India?
Yes, ma'am. I fully agree with you that India has a very poor track record in case of research and development. So, to indicate, thankfully, in last few years, there has been a welcome thrust on this aspect of research and development. Basically, there are two, three aspects. So, let me highlight. One is that if you do good research and development, it will be reflected in your greater innovative production process. It will also be reflected in the number of patents which you file, so that it cannot be copied. So you will get you can file a patent. There are some fees also for this. So, but here there are two aspects of the problem of this, which are also in budget, in other kinds of expenditure item. One, obviously, I agree with you entirely that the expenditure on R&D has to go up, and has to go up very significantly. But this is one part of the story. I am reminded of a Hindi film, शायद शाहरुख खान है किसी का डायलॉग, बहुत पॉपुलर फिल्म थी, पिक्चर अभी बाकी है मेरे दोस्त. So the other side is obviously the allocation on R&D has to go up, but simultaneously, what is equally, I would say, more important, there has to be greater, what we call greater bang for the buck. Those expenditures, like in budget also for last 15 years, earlier there was only a focus on outlay, on how much expenditure you were spending. But now there has been a welcome shift in the last 15 years, 20 years, across finance ministers, across government, whether it is NDA government or UPA. I think first time when Mr. Chidambaram was the FM way back in 2004 or 5, he brought in this concept of moving from outlay to outcome. So here in R&D also, maybe with a more focused attempt, you can generate better outcomes. So I agree with you fully that There has to be a much greater spend on research and development, because right now we are at a very, I think it could be 1% or even lower. Much, but obviously this has to go up. This has to attain a critical mass. But then, apart from pushing up this expenditure, this has to be better utilized. This has to be more optimally used. So once you do both these things, then this will be reflected in India's innovative production processes. We have a tendency to compare in almost all aspects of India with China. So if you compare in the Indian position, we are very badly placed, that in terms of innovative production processes, in terms of patents. But thankfully, there seems to be a greater realization across the board for this focus on sharper focus on R&D. So I think gradually, this is not going to happen overnight, but I think we are moving in the right direction, and I'm confident that going ahead, India would make carve out a distinctive niche for itself in innovative production processes, in bringing out latest research and development practices. It's going to be a long haul. It's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight, but I'm sure we are on the right path. But some kind of a momentum must be given to this kind of a drive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
So my
afternoon.
name is Neha, and like sir, nowadays our education sector is more focusing on soft skills. Today's era is an artificial intelligence era. So my question is, sir, what is the effect of this budget on coding, artificial intelligence, robotics, or 3D sector?
Thank you, ma'am, for an interesting question. This digitization, artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, all this has become part of daily life. Almost all sectors of the economy are completely trans- if we look at this budget, one of the sectors in which these kind of techniques, they were not used traditionally. They have been used significantly in the services sector, and agriculture was largely left out. So if you look at this year's budget, I refer to the accelerator fund, I refer to digital public infrastructure. So this is certainly one aspect. So this budget also attempts to give a, if you see, you are very young, so I cannot say about you, but maybe if you ask your parents, who may be about 50, 60, and if you compare the functions and working of the present day banking with about, let us say, 20, 25 years, there would be a sea change. You'll think that today you are living in America, and 20 years back, you cannot imagine. Even, for example, if I go to give a lecture somewhere in Mumbai, they will send me maybe a check for, I publish an article in Economic Times. Economic Times send me a check for, let us say, 5,000 rupees for an op-ed publishing on the main editorial page. Now I have to deposit this check in my account. It goes for clearing. It will go to first to, I was posted in Bangalore, first to Bangalore, then to Mumbai, then they will locate, and the whole process could take almost 45 days to 2 months. Now all this happens simultaneously, seamlessly. So there have been very welcome changes in digitization, computerization, use of artificial intelligence. These are all very welcome things, and I think this is going to change the face of our life completely, the way we go. There are some areas of concern also. Phishing is there, some cases of wrong use are there, hacking are there. So obviously, any good thing comes with certain riders. So we have to be careful with this. And sometimes there is no substitute. This artificial intelligence, one good thing is it is expected to significantly hike the efficiency level, the productivity level. But one bad thing about these all these concepts is that they lack the emotional quotient. So as human beings, we also have to be guided by considerations, humane considerations, considerations of humanity, considerations of sympathy, compassion, and empathy. And being a machine thing, artificial intelligence cannot look into these aspects. So while this is very good, This is good up to a point, and ultimately, as human beings, we have to exercise our judgment, our application of mind, our discrimination. So, possibly a mix of the two, artificial intelligence plus human intelligence, could be the way to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question?
Yes, sir. I have a question that as you said that capital expenditure
Ma'am,
is increased and
excuse me, may possibly last or one more question because I have to go somewhere else also. So I'll take one more question after you, and then I'll request Madam to close. Okay, go ahead, ma'am. Sorry.
okay. Yes. Oh, no problem, sir. So the question is that as you said that capital expenditure has been increased and it is a welcoming, step. But it is, but my like question is that is it going to be a wise decision in terms of job creation, which is on the cost of the welfare programs where the spending has gone down to 18% from 20%. If we see, look up to the last budget.
Madam, complex question. This will take some time, but anyway, let me try to respond to it. One is that if you look at the social sector programs, so these are basically come under the head of revenue expenditure. So I'm also giving you some. I'm giving you some terms after this session. You can do a Google check. So this
Okay.
will not come form part of capital expenditure of the government of India. This will form part of the revenue expenditure. As I said earlier, I think I mentioned it prominently upfront that the multiplier here is much lower, 0.7, 0.8, at the most 0.9. In case of capex, the multiplier is 1.8, 1.5, 2 in the first year. It could go to 4.5, 3 years, 4 years down the line. So obviously, this will give a greater push to the Indian economy. I'll just like to give one, two more examples. It is something like you may have heard of a gentleman called Muhammad Yunus. He's basically a Bangladeshi economist. He was given Nobel Prize also for his pioneering work in the area of microfinance. Basically, all over the world, there's been a growth of microfinance, self-help groups all over the, not just India, all over the world. And this gentleman, Professor Muhammad Yunus of Bangladesh, was awarded Nobel Prize about, I think, 20, 25 years back. Not sure exactly about the year. So in this microfinance is very important concept. I think Punjab, you're surrounded by, you have rivers and ponds almost all over Punjab. So let me this example, so you'll be able to relate to this example. In microfinance is very important concept that if a poor person approaches you, maybe you will help him or her for a day or two, but you have your own limitations, you have your own family requirements, other things, so you've been beyond a point you would not be able to for you to help that person. So in microfinance there's a very powerful one sentence which says that don't give a man fish to eat, teach him how to fish. So this is a very powerful thought that there has to be an element of self help. So this also that means all these things should not be seen as some kind of a, I am not getting about. I don't want to use the word dole. This is not exactly a dole, but dole has very bad. You cannot be a handouts. There has to be an element of such self sustainability in any process. So basically, and in these times in Indian economy, subsidy has become a very bad word. So instead of subsidy, what we see is that these poor people could be incentivized to set up their small microfinance units, small kirana shop, or some such things, so that their livelihood gets placed on a sustainable basis. Another consideration in your, because your question was very complex, there are several aspects, so I'm just trying to touch a few. Another aspect is the need to contain fiscal deficit, and if fiscal deficit goes beyond a limit, uh, mm, I'm sure all of us are agreed that in India we have a wide range of problems. But if you compare in your life, you may have certain issues. I will have certain other issues on the family level, on the official level. Madam Khosla, Mrs. Duggal, they may have their. All of us at all stages of our life, at all positions, have certain problems. So in India, we have definitely our set of problems. But if you compare us with the position, let us say, in Pakistan, with the position in Sri Lanka, and last 3 4 days, some scary news are coming about Bangladesh also. So we are far far better off. And one of the major reasons for this kind of a thing is that there has in these countries. Venezuela is a classic example where inflation had done, and I think Venezuela is a Latin American country where inflation had touched a level of about 10,000%. So what happens is that, again, to use the expression which is used in newspapers is freebies. If you give people freebies, then there's no incentive to work, and this will push up your fiscal deficit and lead to a complete collapse of the government's economy's revenue, the entire fiscal system. I refer to the FRBM Act, going back about 20 years, across governments, across finance ministers, across prime minister. There is a complete sense of unanimity on the need to contain fiscal deficit. So let us say, are you a student or are you working somewhere?
Sir, I'm a student.
Okay. So let us say your parents give you monthly pocket money of 5,000 rupees. So you may have some different priorities, so that if you want to fulfill all your wishes, it will come to, let us say, your mother has given you 5,000 rupees to spend, but your total expenses come to about 8,000 rupees. So in that case, you have to make some choice. Your mother may say that, Pramiti, I cannot give you more than 5,000 rupees. I have also my own compulsions. I have to run the household. So you have always, in economics and finance and policy making, also at the household level, there are always issues of one very important concept of what we call trade-off. You cannot have, like in English also, there's a very popular phrase, idiom going back about 2000 years ago, that you cannot eat your cake and have it too. So same lines in economics, finance, budget, also at the household level, there is always a concept of what we call trade-offs. So by trade-off means, if you want to have one thing, you will have to sacrifice on something else. So
Yes.
it cannot be that you can have all the best things in life. Somewhere down the line, you may also be required to make some adjustment, to make some compromises. So given all these compulsions, I think the FM did not have much choice. But that is an individual take. That is my impression. That is my assessment. You may have a different take. And India, we are a democratic country. I am entitled to my opinion. You are welcome to hold your opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So it is really the enlightening journey to be a part of this talk, as you have provided really a detailed insight of all our queries with very patience. Now I would like to invite Dr. Meenakshi Duggal, HOD of Economics Department, to convey formal vote of thanks.
I take the responsibility to wind up this session. It was very fruitful. It was very good. And there are many questions, I think, unanswered, even left also. And we will definitely have some other session with you, sir, some other time, because we have time limit also. I am also thankful from the core of my heart for such a wonderful discussion of the day. I'm thankful to the local members of the local managing committee, Shri B.M. Goyalji and Shri Sachidevaji, for joining us and representing the industry of Batala. I'm also thankful to Dr. Jasbirji, who has joined us for this webinar. And I'm also thankful to Madam Principal for her kind guidance, and thankful to all my colleagues who have joined on Sunday, and students also who have joined on Sunday and made this webinar a very wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Pleasure being with all of you. Thank you very much.